Hi, I'm Christy Bemrick from Madison, Alabama.
And I'm Helena Harrison from Jamaica.
And we're here to introduce Lenny Kohm. He's from North Carolina, but he's told us that he doesn't get to spend a lot of time at home anymore because he's been the outreach coordinator for the last Great Wilderness Project, whose goal it is to preserve Alaska's national interest wildlands.
His work as a photojournalist is breathtaking, and he has been traveling all over the world and the country educating the public on the importance of preserving the Alaskan wilderness and helping local communities setting up their own grassroots programs for issues that concern their respective communities. Without any further ado, put your hands together for Mr. Lenny Kohm.
Can we turn that off? Thank you. I was supposed to bring this dog because this dog has more to do with what I'm going to talk about than I do. So, Kelly, have you had enough yet? Come on, girl. How'd that work out, Joe? Pretty good? Yeah, it was really good.
Perrito ni. Perro. Perro.
My name is Lenny, and I sort of live in North Carolina, but like I was saying, I don't get a lot of time to spend there. And I guess I should tell you, before I tell you what I'm doing, I should tell you why I'm doing it. I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you guys love wilderness?
Yeah.
Well, I love it too. I really love it. And today every time before I talk to folks, I sort of try and clear my mind, and today I went outside and just before I came in here, and it's really a beautiful day. And I found a spot where I had a clear shot to the mountains. And I looked at the mountains, and I tried to imagine what it was like to look at those mountains 500 years ago, when the first European person stood there and looked at it. And you know, you almost get a sense of it. But then of course you hear traffic, see houses, see wires, and I realized that all that's gone. I realized that we'll never know what it was like. And it was a little bit upsetting. But then I also realized that we need a place to live. We're here. We need a place to work. We need a place to be educated. But all the same, it's gone. We'll never know what it was like. We'll never know what the spirit of the land was, what the land sounded like, or what it felt like. It's gone. And that's why, to me, it's really important that there is a place on this continent where you and I can go, and we can look at the land, we can look at the forests, we can look at the lakes, we can look at the rivers and the mountains and the wildlife, and even the people that live around there. And it's exactly the way it was 30,000 years ago. And what's even more exciting is not only can we go there and enjoy it, but we have the opportunity to preserve it. So that in another 30,000 years, our great-grandchildren, that's about 1,000 grandchildren away, they can go and they can look at it and they can say, this is the way it was 60,000 years ago. Well, you've probably figured out by now, but the name of the place that I'm going to talk to you about is the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge in Alaska. And what's so important about it? Well, I'm not a scientist, I'm really a photographer by trade, but I know a little bit about it. The Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is the largest wildlife refuge in the United States. It's about the same size as the state of South Carolina. And what's so important about it is is that it is the major portion of the last complete ecosystem left in North America. Now think about that. 500 years ago when we got here, this whole continent was a complete ecosystem. And now it's shrunk down to this relatively small, tiny place up in northeast Alaska and northwest Canada. And what is so important about the very tiny place that I'm going to talk to you about, the coastal plain, is that it is the biological heart of this whole ecosystem. So naturally, granolas and scientists and everybody like that are very interested in this place.
No.
But there is another group that's interested, because there are suspected deposits of gas and oil there. And I didn't start out my life wanting to be an environmentalist. I did a bunch of other things first, none of which has anything to do with what I'm doing now. But when I was a professional photographer, I was living in Sonoma, California, in the wine country, and I had a great deal worked out. I took pictures of wine bottles. And it was really good. I made a really good living, and what was so good about it is when after you're finished taking pictures of the wine bottles, they don't want them back. So being a good environmentalist, I would finish them as quickly as possible so I could get them to the recycling center. Well, I had this other scam worked out, where every summer I would contact all the environmental magazines and I'd try and find out what they're going to be working on in the coming year. Then I'd go there and photograph it, come back, sell the pictures, back to the wine bottles. Well, in the summer of '87, I got a phone call from Audubon magazine asking me if I'd be interested in going up to the coastal plain of the Arctic Refuge into Prudhoe Bay in Alaska to photograph it, because there was this huge controversy raging in Congress whether or not we should open up the coastal plain for oil and gas development, or whether we should protect it forever as wilderness. So I'd never been up to the Arctic, and I really didn't care about the issue. I didn't know anything about it. But I thought I'd never been up there and it might be nice to see it, so I took the assignment. And I drove up to Alaska from California. And I remember driving up there and thinking to myself, you know, here I am, driving up to Alaska to cover this issue that has to do with oil and gas development, and I'm using a lot of gas and oil. Now, if it doesn't come from up there, where's it going to come from? Everything I heard about up there was that it was a vast wasteland. Well, I got up there, and the first part of my assignment was to photograph Prudhoe Bay. Prudhoe Bay is where the oil comes from that comes down the Trans-Alaska Pipeline all the way to Valdez and then is shipped down to the lower 48. So I got a chance to photograph Prudhoe Bay and see what the oil companies are doing there. And I got a chance to spend about 2.5 weeks backpacking and photographing the coastal plain of the Arctic Refuge. And then I also got a chance to visit and spend time with the native people whose villages surround the Arctic Refuge. Well, when I came back at the end of that summer, I found myself to be a much different person. Suddenly, I couldn't concentrate on my clients or my business. All I could think about was I couldn't stand the thought of that place being destroyed. So I decided that I was going to do something about it. And I thought about it, and I thought, well, what can I do? I'm only one person, and not a very big person at that. But I'm determined, so I decided that I was going to try. And I think, my God, who am I up against? The oil companies? Powerful forces in the Congress? What can I possibly do? How can I make a difference? So I sat down and I had a series of brilliant ideas. The first brilliant idea I had was, I thought, I'm going to write a speech. And if I ever get a chance, I'm going to go to Washington, D.C., and I'll give that speech to some congressional committee or somebody there will listen to me. So I sat down and I wrote this speech, and I have to tell you, it was truly a brilliant speech. And if you don't believe me, you can ask my mother. She'll tell you. So I wrote this speech, and then I thought, get a grip. You're not going to go to Washington. Nobody's going to listen to you about this. And I tried to forget about it, and I kind of walked around in a circle for about a month. And then 6 weeks later, there I was in Washington, D.C., giving that very same speech, word for word, to the United States Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. And was I nervous? I mean, there I was, sitting with these guys with suits and tassels on their shoes. It was really unusual. But I sat there and well, I have to tell you that it truly was a brilliant speech. And you will be astonished to find out that my brilliant speech didn't dazzle those senators. Not one of them jumped up and ran out to change their vote in favor of protecting the Arctic. But I can remember sitting at that table in the Capitol and thinking to myself, here I am in Washington, D.C., talking to the United States Senate, and I haven't even lifted a finger. What happens if I really try and do something? So I got all charged up and hung around Washington for a couple days, kind of figured out what was going on, and found out that in my home congressional district, the congressman that represented me, Congressman Bosco, was on a very important committee, the Merchant Marine and Fisheries Committee, which at that time had jurisdiction over wildlife refuges, and I found out that he hadn't made up his mind. In fact, he was leaning the other way. So I decided that the first thing I was going to try and do was affect his decision. Well, I mean, how do you do that? So I went to one of my friends who knew a little bit about activism, and I said, you know, where do I start? He said, well, you've got to get media attention. So I was actually able to coerce one of the local newspapers into interviewing me. And it was my first ever newspaper interview. And I was really excited, and I went there, and I thought it went really well. The reporter asked me a bunch of good questions, and I came up with what I thought were the right answers, and we talked about the Arctic and oil development and the environment in general. And then I thought the interview was over, because he said, let's go to lunch. I mean, I thought we were done. So I said, sure, we went to lunch. And we talked about everything under the sun, and then suddenly he said, well, Lenny, what do you want from all this? What's your personal goal? What's in it for you? I said, I want to deliver Congressman Bosco. So we left lunch, and I went home, and the next morning, about noon, I was at home and the phone rang. So I pick up the phone and the voice at the other end said, this is Congressman Bosco's office. We'd like to know what you meant by you want to deliver Congressman Bosco. I mean, I was terrified. I had visions of concentration camps and everything else. I really thought I'd gone too far. But then what happened really set the tone for what my life is all about. Because when I hung up the phone, it didn't stop ringing for the rest of the day. It was people wanting to help me deliver Congressman Bosco. And what was funny about it is they really didn't care for what. They just wanted him delivered. So by the end of the day, we had this group of 30 people who wanted to go to work on the issue, and we went to work. And in 6 months' time, we put over 8,000 letters on Congressman Bosco's desk in support of wilderness. And suddenly, as if by magic, the man became a true visionary and voted against the development bill in the Merchant Marine and Fisheries Committee. So we figured we're on to something. If this works in our little town, why won't it work in a little town? Why won't it work in Loveland, Colorado? So we decided that we would try and develop a national program and sort of take our message around the country. And you know, We had plenty of money. We had $1.85 between us. So we had all the money we needed to start a national program. But why did we want to do this? Well, I'm going to show you why we wanted to do this. How many of you have been to the coastal plain of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge in Alaska? Somehow I knew about you guys. Well, that's a problem. I mean, it's not a problem for the coastal plain. The coastal plain enjoys it that way. But it's a problem because in the same amount of time I've been doing this, the oil companies have spent over $30 million advertising that the coastal plain of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge in Alaska is a vast wasteland. Well, anybody who's been there knows that isn't true. But even though it's the largest wildlife refuge in the country, not many people go there. It's really hard to get to. I mean, last year was the highest usage it's ever had. A whole 150 people went there. So we don't expect you to go there. So we decided what we would try and do is bring it to you. So in the summer of '88, another man and myself, a man named Glendon Brunk, who is an Arctic wildlife resource management expert who had lived in Alaska for 20 years, he and I went back up to the Arctic in May, the beginning of May of '88, and we stayed up there through August of '88. And it was a 4-month period where we didn't see darkness. It was daylight for 4 months. And Glendon followed the porcupine caribou herd across the Brooks Range and across the coastal plain to the Arctic Ocean. And I worked in 9 different native villages. And we came back at the end of that summer in the beginning of September, and we had 10,000 slides. Now don't get nervous. I've got to cut down to 8,500 and we'll be out of here by Tuesday for sure. And we put together the slideshow and we finished it in, the end of 1988. And since then, basically, I've been on the road. And I've done this program over 1,000 times, 1,044, in 49 states for groups of from 2 to 2,400 people. So you guys are right in that range, and I'm real comfortable. And what's really remarkable is that in this period of time, I've been able to speak directly to over 100,000 people. And when I think about the times we've been interviewed by the media, radio, or television, or newspapers, we've actually been able to bring our message to millions of people. You know, why do we do this? It's really a remarkable process when I think about it. And you know, everywhere I go, people ask me the same question. Why should I care? I mean, why should these people from Mauritius care? Why should the people in Colorado care? Why should people from Illinois care? Well, the reason that we should care is because we own it. It's public land. Each one of us owns, in this country, 1/250 millionth of the coastal plain of the Arctic Refuge. And I know that sounds insignificant, but you probably figured out that I've taken the time to figure out exactly how much of it each one of us Americans own. And it works out to be a 16-foot square. And hopefully by the end of this program, you'll feel the same as I do, and I don't want any oil wells on my 16-foot square. But I think before you make a decision on what you think we should do with this land, I'd like you to see it. So I'm going to show you the Last Great Wilderness slideshow because that's really what it is, the last great wilderness. And after, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of my experiences up there and give you the opportunity to talk to somebody that I've known for a really long time, and then before that, somebody that I haven't known for quite as long. And then we'll kind of talk about what we can do about it. So here's the Last Great Wilderness.